Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Congressman Dean Phillips. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Brittany.
Before we dive into the conversation, the Iowa caucuses were last night, and I would love to get your thoughts. Donald Trump won by a landslide. What's your reaction?
Well, the polls predicted it. And my contention to Democrats right now is pay attention, because the polls are showing that Donald Trump is stronger than people imagined, and he's going to beat Joe Biden. In fact, the last polls that just came out show that Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and former President Trump will all beat Joe Biden in the general election. And there's a delusion right now amongst my friends in the Democratic Party that somehow President Biden is reelectable. And the truth is he's not. I think President Trump is a lot stronger than people would imagine and that people want. And I think he's going to just walk through this GOP primary in a cakewalk. And the good news is Democrats still have an opportunity to recalibrate. I know it's not traditional. I know it's not what conventional wisdom within the political industrial complex would have us believe. But the reality is I can beat Trump, and I can also beat Haley. President Biden can't. And I think that's what we discovered in Iowa. He is strong, and he's coming on stronger. And Democrats are completely delusional and sleepwalking into a disaster if we maintain this coronation.
Let's talk about that poll you just mentioned, because the numbers coming out of Iowa last night do suggest it would be a cakewalk for Donald Trump to get the GOP nomination. And a recent CBS poll, as you stated, said that Nikki Haley, Governor Ron DeSantis, and Donald Trump would all beat President Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup in 2024. Now, a tracker from 538 says that you voted with President Biden 100% of the time. So what would make the outcome different if we replace President Biden with nominee Dean Phillips?
Well, let's start with what the numbers are also showing, which is most of this country, an overwhelming majority of this country collectively does not want a Trump and Biden rematch. Most of this country believes both men to be too old to serve in this position. And that's not my comment about them. That is what the country is saying. So let's just start with generational change. The biggest contrast you can draw right now is I'm a 54-year-old, competent, experienced candidate of good principle and ready to lead the country. President Biden at age 82 by the time of the next election, 86 by the time of the end of his second term, if he were to win again, is an elderly man, a good man. But that's what the country's saying. That's one. My policies are different. I will be a Democrat to acknowledge the truth. The southern border is an unmitigated disaster. We have chaos there. We have chaos in our cities. We have a crisis overseas of war, and it is spreading. It is not being contained. We also have a horrible lack of affordability in our country. The president has done a good job of investing in America. You just referenced my voting record with him. Those were good investments, the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act. But he has not invested in Americans. And that's my contention and the biggest point of difference with the president. We need health care for everybody, coverage for all. We need to build 7 million houses in this country to eliminate homelessness and put downward pressure on unaffordable rents. And we need to be a country that finally establishes a mechanism by which young people can go to college, can go to trade school, can go to community college without being burdened with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. That has not been accomplished. So between costs and chaos, we are very different leaders, not to mention the most obvious, which is generational. And that's why I think this country would much rather see a Nikki Haley, Dean Phillips matchup this November than a Donald Trump, Joe Biden matchup. It's about the future. And that's my contention. And I'm seeing it now every day in the streets in New Hampshire when I campaign around the country. The people are becoming desperate for change. And if they vote in primaries, anything is possible.
Bill Ackman last night, I believe it was him on an X Live with you, said that Democrats essentially supporting President Biden is like supporting the emperor with no clothes. He doesn't have a high approval rating. Most Americans don't want to see a 2020 rematch. So are any Democratic colleagues in the House supporting you, either privately or publicly?
Oh, privately, a number. In fact, I do believe that there's a growing sense amongst my colleagues in Congress that it is time for change, that we are much more likely not just to win the White House if I was at the top of the ticket, but also keep the Senate and the House, and perhaps equally importantly, generate enough excitement and energy to win down ballot races. If you were to ask, Brittany, all of the members of Congress in battleground districts, if you were to ask all the down ballot state house race Democrats around the country, what they're thinking right now, they are quietly desperate for a change at the top of the ticket because they know they're not going to win. And I'm hearing that from state reps all around the country right now. Thank goodness you're trying. We'd like you to win because we need energy at the top of the ticket. We need to energize young people. We need to young people right now, Brittany, in the last polls, are now favoring Donald Trump over Joe Biden. People under 35 are favoring Donald Trump. The Latino community favoring Donald Trump. Black men leaving the camp Biden in masses right now. We are in a disaster mode, not to mention the Muslim community around this country. Very disappointed in President Biden, despite what I believe Joe Biden's support for Israel is something I admire. But the way that this war has been prosecuted is heartbreaking. There's no question. So there is an erosion of support for him that is palpable. It's real. And like I said, it is a delusion that is being propagated by people publicly, even though privately they know the truth. And that is the disease of politics right now, the unwillingness to be courageous when the country demands it. And it's time for change. And believe me, I'm going to bring it.
Why is no one or not that many people who are in elected office coming forward and supporting you then publicly? Would you be comfortable naming those Congress members who are supporting you privately?
I'm not going to out them. That would be shameful and inappropriate. But the truth is, there's no reward for being courageous in Congress. The only rewards are for being quiet and silent and following the orders and staying in line. And that's the problem, because the minute we perform well in New Hampshire or our campaign starts catching on, which it will, it's a matter of time, that will change. And it will take a courageous member of Congress to start that process, likely somebody who's not running for re-election, because those are the people that finally are liberated from this entire political industrial machine. And that time will come. But the truth is, I don't care about what people in Washington think. The joyful part about the United States still is that voters matter. And yes, I'm taking on a party mechanism that's awfully difficult to defeat, but we will. As long as voters can be introduced to me and have a chance to actually send their message by a vote, we're going to do great. But the Democratic Party has eliminated that possibility in Florida. They've eliminated that possibility in North Carolina. They're trying to do it in other states. And here in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Secretary of State or Justice Department had to send a cease and desist letter to the Democratic National Committee just a few days ago for the unlawful suppression of voters. So there is something going on here that I really want people at least to be aware of. And that's the truth. And I intend to overcome it by shedding light on something that is really a tragic affront to democracy.
I do want to get to New Hampshire in a moment, but before that, you are left off the primary ballot in a few states. And you said this, quote, "It is tragic to witness fundamental American democracy under attack, not just from far-right MAGA Republicans, but the very establishment of our own Democratic Party." Can you elaborate on that comparison a little bit for us?
Sure. I was trapped in the House chamber on January 6th when President Trump inspired an insurrection. Call it what you will, a mob, a riot, an insurrection. The objective was clear. They wanted to prevent the counting of the ballots. So set that aside for a moment. Democrats right now are actually trying to prevent the printing of ballots and furthermore trying to prevent voters from opining on those ballots, not by violent mechanisms, but by, frankly, inappropriate backroom mechanisms. So forget the mechanism, but think about the objective. It's the same thing. It's the same danger. It's the same affront to democracy. That's why the parties are a big problem. They are not public institutions. I hope people recognize this. They are private institutions. Who are these people? Who are the party, right? In a democracy, we should have transparency. We should know who's pulling the levers. Donald Trump is essentially the GOP leader, and Joe Biden is essentially the Democratic Party leader. So when the Democratic Party leader is silent, won't debate, is oppressing his other candidates and keeping them off ballots, and literally suppressing voters in Florida, in North Carolina, in New Hampshire, we have a problem. And the truth is, very few media outlets are covering something that I consider to be a very significant erosion of democracy playing out right in front of our eyes. And I call it the hypocrisy of democracy because it's real. And I am on a mission to expose it. And I do believe once people wake up, they're going to be shocked. And that's how we seize it back, by voting for people of principle and character that won't let this happen, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
From what you're saying right now, then, do you think the Democratic Party is as big as a threat to democracy as those who tried to overturn the election in 2020?
They have a chance to rectify it. I don't think they will. But the answer to the question is, I think both parties right now are acting in manners that are counterproductive, certainly, and I think, yes, destructive to democracy. Now, I will say this, the GOP competition right now is transparent, it's energetic, it's vigorous, and it's public. Now, the front runner refuses to debate. I think that's shameful. I think Donald Trump should be on that debate stage for people to see him. But do I see a party, at least the GOP right now, exercising democracy? I mean, I have to be honest, yes. Do I see a Democratic Party exercising democracy? No. I see a Democratic Party actually working very much against it. And that's why I celebrate Marianne Williamson, who is now in her second race. It takes courage. It takes someone with the willingness to compete. You know, Ramaswamy dropped out last night of the race. Do I see things the same way as him? No. Do I think some of his contentions and propositions were ridiculous? Yes. But do I celebrate people who are willing to put it on the line, enter these competitions to give voters an option? Absolutely. I think that's the most important foundation of democracy. And right now, the Democratic Party is not fostering it. They're not watering those seeds. If anything, they're poisoning them. And that's the truth. And I think we need competition badly, both inside the parties and for the parties.
Those are some strong words. So do you think that this falls on President Biden then? Because a big part of his platform, both last election and this one, is I'm not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Basically, are you saying I see Joe Biden as a threat to democracy?
I think here's what I think. Donald Trump is a offensive threat to democracy. I do think he has intention to dismantle it. Joe Biden is a weak defender of democracy. I think we're seeing that. A weak defender of democracy. Why? Because he won't debate. He won't take questions from the press. He won't have a press conference. He won't show up in front of voters. He won't do a town hall. And he is yet to opine on anything we just discussed. Answer the question directly. Why won't you debate? Answer the question directly. Why is it okay to go against state rules and actually deny other candidates of relative prominence on the ballot? And why is Democratic voters the chance to weigh in on their nominee? And if he answers those questions, maybe I'll change my mind. But the absence of answering them, Brittany, is to me the foundational element of a lack of defense of democracy. You've got to answer the questions. And if you're not willing to, then step aside and allow someone who is willing to address the questions and run to the fire. Let them take the stage. That could be me, it could be other people. But I'm not going to allow this nonsense to continue quietly behind closed doors and at such risk to the future for my children and future generations of this country.
And to be clear, you would debate President Joe Biden if he took you up on that offer. You would debate President Donald Trump or former President Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Governor DeSantis. Absolutely.
Debate, deliberation, and discussion are the hallmarks of a thriving democracy. As those erode, especially when the leaders of the free world, former President Trump and now President Biden, refuse to engage in debate, that's horrifying to me. Yes, we should all be debating within the parties, against the parties. When I do so, by the way, it's not just to make my case, it's actually to learn. That is how I learn a conservative perspective, because when you run for president and win, your job is not to represent your party, which is unfortunately what happens. It's to represent the darn country. Yes, we should be debating. Yes, I will accept a debate. I understand he's the leader of the free world. He can't debate 30 times during a primary, but should he debate 1, 2, 3 times perhaps at the very least? Absolutely. I'm respectful, but the absence of it, the unwillingness to even consider it, is ridiculous. And I will also ask to debate Nikki Haley. I do think this country should see the number 2 GOP candidate and the number 2 Democratic candidate right now, at least on a stage, talking about the issues. I think that would be good for the country. And I know the country would much rather see that matchup for the future. And it is time for change. And I think the country is just desperate for it. But without debate, they'll never even know the difference.
Let's now move on to New Hampshire, where you're seeing a surge. A recent poll has you at 26%, opposed to President Biden's 58%. What are you attributing that surge to?
Old-fashioned campaigning. You know, when you show up, you walk through the snow, you answer the questions, You do the tough stuff, you show up, you debate, you shake hands, you listen to people. It's amazing what happens. And that's why New Hampshire is so important. That's why so many people here are so upset about what the Democratic Party has tried to do, which is to take away a 103-year practice of democracy that they take very seriously. And I can feel that in the street. What do I attribute it to? Two things: a massive appetite for change, a little bit of surprise that here's a candidate that they didn't know the name of as recently as 9 weeks ago, who's competent and able and prepared and energetic, represents the next generation. And there's a growing recognition that Joe Biden, despite being a good man, is not in a position to win the election and move our country into the future at his stage of life. Those are just the truths. And with each passing day, each passing week, those numbers continue to climb. I'll stay in this race as I continue to introduce myself to people. And I think on the 23rd of January, what you're going to see, Brittany, is a very weak incumbent candidate who has had to use a write-in initiative, a super PAC to promote that, members of his cabinet coming up to New Hampshire to make the case for him. You know, it's kind of pathetic. And a sitting incumbent featured here in New Hampshire, the last two of them was Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Clinton generated 84% of the vote in that primary for his reelection. Obama generated 81%. So think about those numbers on the 23rd and see where Joe Biden falls. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the 50% range. If it is, that is a horrifying and very voter-proven example of the weakness of his candidacy. And I just think it's in his best interest and the country's to step out of the race and encourage a competition. I'm not trying to clear the space for me alone. I'm saying we should have a multi-candidate competition. It's not too late. And if we don't do that, the writing is on the wall, and it will be worse than 2016. The difference is this time we knew how to prevent it.
The DNC reportedly called the New Hampshire primary meaningless. What's your response to that?
Pathetic. I hope that letter and its response, which is the cease and desist letter that the state of New Hampshire had to send to the Democratic Party, again, asking them to cease and desist from the unlawful suppression of voters, those letters should be brought to the Library of Congress, the National Archives, put under glass as an example of how the parties themselves can actually undermine the very practices of democracy that ostensibly they stand to represent. I think it's appalling. People here in New Hampshire cannot believe that the Democratic Party would have the audacity to say that this is not an election, it is meaningless, and your votes don't count. What is more anti-democratic? What is more anti-democratic than telling people that it doesn't matter? I've never seen such a thing. And I think it is a symptom of a very significant disease of rot in both parties, but sadly in the one that I represent. And I had no idea. And I've enabled it, I've invested in it, I've represented it, and I'm proud of the Democratic Party. But the absence of transparency and the erosion of integrity by people who know better, yes, is a distinct risk to democracy. And that's the truth. And that's why I think New Hampshire will demonstrate that on January 23rd.
You're saying you're proud of the Democratic Party, but you're also using terms like they're delusional right now. They're contributing to the rot of democracy. Are you losing faith at all in the Democratic Party during this process?
Well, I've lost faith in the leadership of the Democratic Party, absolutely. Not Democratic voters, not the recent history of the Democratic Party. I'm a Hubert Humphrey Democrat, the man who had the audacity to go to Philadelphia in 1948 as a young man and implore the Democratic Party get out of the shadow of states' rights and into the bright sunshine of human rights. The Hubert Humphrey that said the moral test of government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, the dusk of life, and the shadows of life. That's the Democratic Party I love. It's not too late to recapture those principles. We are absolutely wayward. We are absolutely lacking leadership. The president is the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. And the truth is, I think the country is losing faith in his leadership as our president. And I can tell you, as a Democrat in Congress, there has been no leadership from this president as a Democrat. And I think it's time for change. We're a big tent. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of backgrounds, a lot of geographies, a lot of policy perspectives. That's a beautiful thing, but that requires really bold leadership. I have great faith in Hakeem Jeffries, by the way, but I am losing faith in people that have been doing this for way too long, who have perverse incentives and are far more focused on the preservation of tradition than progress. And by definition, we are progressives that are literally acting in an antithetical manner. So I'm concerned. And the other issue is this, Brittany. I'm a member of Congress. I don't even know who these people are. And Americans do not know who these people are. Who are these people? The party, right? There are a handful of people that are literally encapsulating the president, making the decisions, and doing what you do in politics and not paying attention to the principles of a country that is screaming awfully loudly that we will beat you because you're not listening to us. And that's part of the problem. Lack of transparency. Who are these people? The process is not transparent. The process is corrupt. And the sad truth is I did not anticipate this would happen, but I have to expose it. And it's not what I wanted to do, but it is my mission and my responsibility.
Well, let's look forward to next week then, to the New Hampshire primary. What does a victory in New Hampshire look like for you?
Well, victory is relative. I mean, I don't see an outcome that will not the weakness of President Biden and the new emerging strength of my campaign. And more than that, where Democratic voters are, which is really upset with the status quo. So look, if I get into the 20-some% range, high 20s, that would be outstanding. Anything above that would be wonderful. But, I like to underpromise and overdeliver. I do know one thing, the president is weak, and I know the numbers will show that. And victory is relative. I'm going to continue either way. Most importantly, I think it will be the introduction of me and my campaign to the country. Then we head to other states, and mark my words, there are other states that feel the same way as New Hampshire, and we're going to demonstrate that. And if the president is up to it, he should campaign, he should earn it, he should debate, and do what you do if you really do care about democracy.
So regardless of the numbers, you're onward after New Hampshire. So what does that strategy look like as we head into Super Tuesday, as we head to the rest of the primary season?
Well, there are 3 states that really, I think, will set the tone for this whole campaign: New Hampshire, Michigan, and South Carolina. Those are the ones. I'm not on the Nevada ballot because I entered the race after that deadline passed. But I think most would agree those 3 states will be the determinant of where this race goes. And if the president shows great weakness, again, Bill Clinton, 84%, Barack Obama, 81%. If President Biden is in the 60s, the 50s, maybe even lower, I mean, think about what that means. Michigan, I do not think he will perform well. South Carolina, we'll see. I think it might be a surprise there too. That's exactly how this system should work. The sad thing is it's not a level playing field. And I guarantee you, if it was, if the Democratic Party actually practiced what it preaches, we would be in a very different place now. And I just have to work harder. The good news is I'm up to the task and can't wait to demonstrate that over time. The good news is we have many months, and I'll be sticking around.
Congressman, before I let you go, I do want to ask you, you had a conversation last night on X with both Bill Ackman and Elon Musk. The big headline coming out of that is that you potentially floated one of them for a member of your cabinet should you win. Would you either select Bill Ackman or Elon Musk for your cabinet?
So, Brittany, I'm so glad you asked that, because this is exactly why every politician known to most Americans is so robotic. Because if they even so much as make a joke, a crack, a comment that is meant in jest or just conversationally, it becomes a headline. And my goodness, I was with 4 men yesterday 4 guys were on that X. And I said jokingly, maybe we have a third of the cabinet right here. That became a national headline. And now the news is that Dean Phillips offered Bill Ackman and Elon Musk cabinet positions. First and foremost, what I said is this: I will have a bipartisan cabinet of the best and brightest American managers and leaders, not politicians. They will be Democrats and Republicans. They will be from all kinds of backgrounds and very diverse in experience. But I'm not offering cabinet positions to anybody right now. Would I be honored for people of great experience and success and capacity to consider that when I am president? Yes. But I want to make it clear on the record that that was not anything but a passing comment in the conversation. And it's just an example of how misinformation and disinformation is not just the domain of social media. It is sadly becoming the domain of formerly respected news outlets like Politico, which the other day misspelled my name in a headline and said that the first Democratic debate occurred in front of a room full of 7th graders. That was not true. And we're facing a dilemma right now, because when I see outlets like that misreporting the truth, it can be tragic. And we just have to work harder to overcome it. So I've not offered anybody a cabinet position because first, I got to win the presidency.
And you did tell me in a conversation in November you were looking for a bipartisan cabinet. Also, in that
Absolutely.
conversation, you did say you tried calling President Biden twice. He didn't return your calls. Have you talked to the president between November and now?
No, it's sad because I think great leaders are graceful and communicative, and I'm disappointed, to be honest with you. I tried twice. The call was not taken, and that's his prerogative. I can tell you if I were president and a competitor called me to express him or herself and wish me well in the competition, I would take it in a heartbeat. I love Americans. I love my colleagues, good Republicans, good Democrats, people of principle. Yes, I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you. And the most important part, and I think this is actually part of the problem, I'm glad you asked. Joe Biden lacks the relationships to lead. His relationships are with all the institutionalists in Washington that are so disconnected from reality that I'm afraid without him building these relationships, without him taking my call, without him having strong and extraordinarily successful, trustworthy relationships with world leaders. Now, he's known many of them for years, but he's not acting in a way that I think great leaders act, which is to ensure that human relationships drive outcomes. And I think it says a lot, sadly, about not the president, perhaps, but the fact is he's being encapsulated by people who are so fearful of him being himself, of him debating and getting out with voters, even talking to a competitor, that they're afraid, so they don't let him take the call. And I think that's probably commentary that most of the country's feeling right now, that perhaps he's not up to it. And I just wish you would take my call, and that's a sad thing. It's a sad thing.
Before I let you go, I know I said that now twice in the conversation, but who are these institutionalists that you believe he's surrounding himself with?
Well, without naming names, I think people understand. It's human nature to protect your position, your power, your prestige, your privilege. And that's how politics works. It is not always the domain of people wanting to do better for the country. Why did Ruth Bader Ginsburg stick around longer than we all know she should have? Why does Mitch McConnell continue to cling on? Why did Senator Feinstein go out that way? Why is Joe Biden running for president again at age 82 he will be? This is what happens when people of otherwise good principle get consumed by the power. Furthermore, those around them, their lifeblood is these people, and they want to protect their position. So of course you will see the same thing, people setting aside principle in favor of personal self-preservation. That's the difference between private service and public service. And I'm a public servant. Now, this is not about my long-term career in Congress. In fact, I think people are upset with me in the Democratic Party because I had the audacity to serve 3 terms and then get out of line. And we should not be a party in which tenure is what dictates success. Talent, initiative, courage, drive, and energy is what's going to change this party for the better. So there you have it. That's saying the quiet part out loud.
Dean Phillips, thank you so much again for the conversation. Best of luck to you in New Hampshire. You're welcome back anytime.
Hey, thank you, Brittany. Have a great day.